Imagine standing in front of a mirror, your body changing in ways you never expected. Every curve, every swell, every small detail feels foreign, uncertain, and you ask yourself quietly, almost afraid to admit it, will my tiny breasts survive motherhood? Will my body be enough to carry this life? These are not just questions, they are fears that ripple through the hearts of countless women, fears that whisper in the middle of the night, that tug at self-esteem, that turn what should be joy into anxiety and self-doubt. And yet, these fears are rarely spoken out loud. Until today. It is my absolute privilege to introduce a woman who does just that, who speaks with courage, honesty, and compassion about what it truly feels like to navigate the insecurities, anxieties, and emotional challenges of pregnancy. She will guide us through a journey that is as personal as it is universal, exploring the fragility of our bodies, the resilience within them, and the truths our fears often try to hide. And now, before we listen to her lovely and heartfelt story, please, if you have not, subscribe to this channel now. Leave whatever you're doing right now and like, share, subscribe, and comment on this channel to enable us get feedback from you and improve our communication and interaction with you as we prepare our subsequent episodes. Please press the subscription button now. So, I invite you to lean in, to open your hearts and minds, and to prepare for a conversation that is intimate, real, and profoundly moving. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Ivana Carter as she shares her insights on pregnancy fears and trauma. Will my tiny breasts survive motherhood? As we step into the unspoken, we give voice to the quiet worries, and we witness the courage that comes from acknowledging them.
Every morning, before I even remember who I am, I face the mirror. Not casually, never casually. It is a ritual heavy with tension. I stand there longer than I should, shoulders stiff, breath shallow, eyes drawn immediately to the same place they always go. I don't need to touch or measure, I already know. I compare myself to memories, to images I've absorbed without consent, to bodies that seem to move through the world with an ease I've never known. My reflection never changes, but my disappointment somehow deepens every day. My breasts have followed me like a quiet accusation all my life. Small, barely there, as if my body stopped halfway through becoming a woman. They feel like proof of something missing, something essential. Whenever I look at them, I hear a voice I didn't choose, but learned too well. Not enough. Not enough to feel confident naked, not enough to feel secure in intimacy, not enough to feel proud of the skin I live in. Low self-esteem has a way of turning inward, of poisoning the relationship you have with your own body. Mine became an enemy long before I had the words for it. I don't see softness or sensitivity, I see failure. I see a body that didn't meet expectations, mine or anyone else's. I angle myself differently in the mirror, lift, imagine, fantasize about a version of me that exists only in my head. A version that would be braver, louder, more deserving of love simply because her chest took up more space. Clothes are never just clothes for me. They are armor. I choose them carefully, not for beauty, but for camouflage. Bras with padding, tops with structure, anything that creates the illusion of fullness. I dress to deceive the world, and sometimes myself. Every outfit carries anxiety. Is it obvious? Can they tell? Do I look like less of a woman today? Even when I smile, even when I laugh, there's a tightness in my chest, not from pride, but from shame. That shame is quiet, but it is constant. It hides beneath fabric and practiced confidence. People see me smiling, composed, functioning. They don't see the way I avoid mirrors in public restrooms, or how I tense up when conversations drift toward bodies, pregnancy, or womanhood. They don't see how deeply I fear being exposed, seen too clearly, judged too quickly. What hurts the most is what I've come to believe about myself because of my breasts, that they make me fragile, that they make me inadequate, that they somehow disqualify me from the fullness of womanhood. I carry the belief that my body is weak, incapable, unprepared for what life might demand of it. And now, with the thought of pregnancy, that belief feels louder, almost unbearable. Because if I already feel like my body has failed me, how can I trust it with motherhood? Standing in front of the mirror, I don't just see my breasts. I see years of insecurity. I see fear layered on fear. I see a woman desperate for reassurance, but trapped in self-doubt. This is the silent war I fight every day, one no one applauds, one no one notices. A war between who I am and who I believe I should have been. And every morning, I wonder if I will ever learn to look at myself without flinching. The mirror has never been a neutral object for me. It has always felt like a witness, too honest, too unforgiving. I don't just look into it, I brace myself before I do, as though preparing for a confrontation I know I will lose. My eyes scan my reflection with a harshness I would never turn on another human being. I linger, hoping for a miracle, knowing none will come. Each glance feels like confirmation of an old fear I carry in my bones. I have memorized my body in fragments, not as a whole. My focus always returns to my chest, as if it defines everything else about me. My breasts feel like a quiet betrayal, unchanging, unresponsive to my wishes, indifferent to my longing to feel complete. They are small in a way that feels loud, announcing what I lack even when no one else is looking. And in that silence, my mind fills the space with judgment. I don't remember a time when I wasn't aware of them. Even as a girl, I learned early that womanhood was supposed to arrive with curves, softness, and fullness. When mine didn't, I assumed I had done something wrong, that my body misunderstood the assignment. Over time, this belief hardened into truth inside me. Something about me is defective, not dramatic enough to be spoken out loud, but heavy enough to shape how I exist in the world. Low self-esteem doesn't scream, it whispers constantly. It tells me to shrink my shoulders, to take up less space. It teaches me to apologize with my posture. My body stopped being something I lived in comfortably and became something I managed carefully. I stopped trusting it. I stopped listening to it. I treated it like an unreliable partner, one that might embarrass me at any moment. When I dress, it's never about expression, it's about correction. I dress to fix myself. I search for bras that promise transformation, for fabrics that blur the truth, for angles that soften reality. Every piece of clothing carries emotional weight. Too tight, and my lack is exposed. Too loose, and I disappear entirely. I am constantly negotiating visibility, wanting to be seen, terrified of being truly noticed. The shame I carry is subtle, but relentless. It slips into conversations, into laughter, into moments that should feel light. When people talk about bodies, pregnancy, or femininity, I go quiet. I feel like an outsider listening to a language I was never taught to speak fluently. I smile, nod, participate, but inside I am folding myself smaller, hiding the part of me I believe disqualifies me. Sometimes the mirror feels less like glass and more like a verdict. It reminds me of every comparison I've ever made, every moment I felt less desirable, less confident, less worthy. It feeds the belief that my body is fragile, that it cannot handle change, pressure, or transformation. And now this is where pregnancy enters my fear like a storm. Because if my breasts already feel inadequate, already feel like they are barely holding together my sense of womanhood, what will pregnancy do to them? Will it expose their weakness? Will it punish me for being small? Will it confirm the fear I've always had that my body is not built for the life I want? This is the silent war, not just with my reflection, but with the story I've been telling myself for years. A story where my body is an obstacle instead of a vessel, where softness equals failure, where smallness equals fragility. And every day, standing there in front of the mirror, I fight between two truths, the one my fear screams at me, and the one I am too afraid to believe, that my body may not be my enemy at all, but a wounded ally waiting for kindness. I didn't wake up one day hating my body. This fear has roots. It was planted slowly, carelessly, by voices that didn't know the damage they were doing, and by a world that never questioned the harm of its standards. It began in childhood, in moments that seemed harmless to everyone else, a laugh that lingered too long, a comment said as a joke, a comparison I was never meant to hear but never forgot. I remember the first time someone pointed it out, not directly, not cruelly, just casually. "You're so flat." The words landed softly, but they stayed. They grew teeth. At that age, I didn't have language for shame yet, but my body learned it anyway. I learned to cross my arms instinctively, to slouch without realizing why, to shrink before I even knew I was taking up space. Teasing followed me quietly, never loud enough to protest, never violent enough to justify pain, just enough to make me aware that something about me was different, and in this world, different is rarely kind. As I grew older, the jokes changed, but the message didn't. Friends blossomed into curves, while I remained unchanged. Adults commented without malice, but without care. "You'll fill out eventually. You're just petite. At least you don't have back pain." Each sentence pretending to comfort me, while quietly confirming that there was indeed something missing. Then there was the media, merciless and everywhere. Billboards, movies, music videos, social media feeds filled with bodies celebrated for their fullness, their softness, their undeniable femininity. Breasts were everywhere, symbols of desirability, power, womanhood, and every image felt like a reminder that I didn't belong to that category. I wasn't represented. I was erased. Comparison became a habit I didn't consciously choose. I compared myself to strangers, to friends, to women who didn't even know I existed. I learned to measure my worth against curves and cleavage. I learned to believe that confidence came packaged in a body like theirs, and that insecurity was the natural consequence of a body like mine. Slowly, without anyone explicitly saying it, I internalized a lie, a devastating one, that my body was weak, that it was fragile, that it was defective. I began to see my breasts not just as small, but as evidence, proof that my body could not handle growth, pressure, or change, proof that it might fail me when I needed it most. This belief didn't stay confined to beauty. It spilled into everything, into how I saw intimacy, into how I imagined motherhood, into how much I trusted myself. By the time pregnancy entered my thoughts, the fear was already waiting. I didn't just fear change, I feared exposure. I feared my body being asked to do something monumental when I already believed it was barely holding itself together. I feared that pregnancy would reveal what I had always suspected, that my body was not strong enough for transformation. What hurts the most is realizing how young I was when I learned to doubt myself, how early I accepted the idea that my body was something to apologize for. No one ever told me directly that I was broken, but the world didn't have to. It showed me, subtly and repeatedly, what it valued, and I learned where I stood. This is where the fear began, not in pregnancy, not in adulthood, but in a little girl who learned too early that her body would always be questioned. And somewhere along the way, that questioning became my own voice. When I trace this fear back far enough, I don't find a single moment, I find a slow accumulation of wounds, tiny cuts that never bled enough to alarm anyone, but deep enough to scar. I was young when my body first became a topic of conversation, younger than I should have been. At that age, I didn't yet know how to defend myself, so I absorbed everything instead. The comments came casually, almost lazily, said with laughter, with smiles, with the assumption that words dissolve once spoken. "You're so flat. You look like a little boy. Don't worry, it'll come later." Nobody paused to see how my face stiffened, how my chest tightened. Nobody noticed how I learned to laugh along, because laughing felt safer than asking why my body was being discussed at all. What hurts most is that many of these voices belonged to people who loved me, friends, family, teachers. Their carelessness taught me an important lesson very early. Pain doesn't need cruelty to exist. Sometimes it comes wrapped in affection, in teasing, in advice disguised as concern. And because it wasn't meant to harm me, I never felt allowed to admit that it did. As my peers grew into their bodies, I stayed behind. I watched bras become necessities for them, while I wore mine like a costume, stuffed, padded, pretending. I learned to measure myself against other girls, silently ranking where I fell short. Locker rooms became hostile territory. Sleepovers came with anxiety. Even puberty, which was supposed to be a rite of passage, felt like a personal failure I couldn't explain. Then the world outside joined in. The media didn't whisper, it shouted. It told me what a woman was supposed to look like, and repeated it until it felt like law. Curves were celebrated. Breasts were symbols of beauty, of desire, of maturity. They were framed as proof of womanhood, as if without them you were unfinished. Every screen I looked at reinforced the same message. This is what counts. I searched myself in those images and found nothing. No bodies like mine being admired, no softness like mine being praised. Instead, I learned to look at my chest the way the world did, with disappointment. Comparison stopped being something I did occasionally, it became automatic. I compared myself even when I didn't want to, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. And slowly, something dangerous happened. I stopped seeing my breasts as just a physical trait. They became a symbol of everything I feared about myself. I began to believe that their smallness meant my body was incapable of growth, incapable of abundance, incapable of change. I translated size into strength and softness into resilience, and by that logic, I decided I had neither. This is how the lie took root, that my body is weak, that it cannot handle pressure, that it is fragile by design, that it might break when asked to become more. No one sat me down and told me this outright, but the message was repeated so often from so many directions that it became truth inside me. I carried it quietly into adulthood, into relationships, into intimacy, into the way I imagined my future. So when I think about pregnancy now, the fear feels ancient. It doesn't start with hormones or biology, it starts with that younger version of me who learned to distrust her own body. The girl who believed her chest was a warning sign. The woman who wonders if motherhood will expose her perceived weakness instead of honoring her strength. This fear didn't come from nowhere. It was taught, repeated, reinforced. And the hardest part is realizing how long I've been carrying it, mistaking it for reality, mistaking it for truth, mistaking it for myself. I imagine the tenderness of it, the fullness, the way love might finally have somewhere to land. And yet, I have always wanted motherhood, quietly, carefully, as if wanting it too loudly might make it slip away. Every time the thought of pregnancy drifts too close, fear rises up to meet it. Not gentle fear, not cautious fear, terror. The kind that tightens my chest and makes my body feel like a fragile thing I must protect from itself. I want to carry life, but I am terrified of what that life might cost me. My body has never felt like a safe place. Loving it already feels like a negotiation, and pregnancy feels like a demand I'm not sure I can meet. I worry about the changes, the stretching, the exposure. I worry that pregnancy will ask more of my body than it is capable of giving, especially my breasts, the part of me I have spent a lifetime doubting. The question haunts me in quiet moments, in the dark, when I'm alone with my thoughts. Will pregnancy destroy what little I have? It feels shameful to even think it, but the fear doesn't listen to shame. My breasts already feel so small, so delicate, like they are barely holding their place on my body. I imagine them changing in ways I can't control, growing too fast, stretching too far, becoming unfamiliar and damaged. I imagine pain I won't survive emotionally. I imagine myself standing in the mirror afterward, looking at a body that feels even more betrayed. My anxiety fills the gaps where reassurance should be. It creates stories, vivid, frightening ones, bursting, tearing, deformity, images I didn't ask for, looping in my mind as if pregnancy were a violent force instead of a natural process. I know these thoughts are extreme, but fear doesn't need logic. It only needs vulnerability, and I have plenty of that. I don't just fear physical pain. I fear confirmation. I fear pregnancy will prove what I've always suspected, that my body is weak, that it cannot handle transformation, that it will collapse under the weight of becoming more. I fear that my breasts, already a source of deep insecurity, will become evidence of my failure rather than symbols of nourishment and life. Sometimes I feel selfish for these fears. Other women talk about pregnancy with excitement, glowing anticipation, pride. I listen and feel like an imposter, like my fear disqualifies me from womanhood itself. I want the baby, the bond, the meaning, but I'm afraid of the mirror afterward, afraid of what I'll see, afraid I won't recognize myself, or worse, that I'll recognize everything I've ever hated. Pregnancy feels like standing at the edge of something sacred and terrifying at the same time, a doorway I long to walk through, but one that threatens to strip me bare, physically, emotionally, completely. I fear that my body, already under scrutiny from my own mind, will not survive the exposure. And yet, beneath the terror, the dream still breathes. Quietly, persistently, a dream wrapped tightly in fear, waiting for me to believe, somehow, that my body is not as fragile as I've been taught to think. Pregnancy lives in my mind as two opposing truths that refuse to meet peacefully. On one side, it is tender and luminous, a dream stitched with hope. On the other, it is overwhelming, invasive, terrifying. Wanting motherhood has never been simple for me. It has always come with a quiet bargaining. I want this, but can my body survive it? I imagine holding a child and feel something soften inside me. I imagine purpose, connection, a love so large it might finally silence the constant doubt. But the moment the dream grows vivid, fear rushes in to reclaim its space. My body enters the picture, and the fantasy fractures. I stop seeing cradles and tiny hands and start seeing my reflection, changed, stretched, unfamiliar. Pregnancy feels like a demand placed on a body I have never trusted. I already live with the sense that my body is barely enough as it is. My breasts, so small and so central to my insecurity, feel like the most vulnerable part of me, like they are already on the edge of failure. When I think about pregnancy, I don't imagine natural change. I imagine damage. I imagine being pushed beyond my limits. I imagine my body betraying me in ways I won't be able to undo. And the question I can't silence, no matter how much I try, is this: will pregnancy destroy what little I have? It feels cruel, almost obscene, to reduce something as sacred as motherhood to fear over my breasts. But fear doesn't respect ideals or guilt. It goes straight for the places that already hurt. My breasts already feel like proof of my inadequacy, and pregnancy feels like a spotlight, bright, unavoidable, exposing. My anxiety fills the silence with images I never asked for. Myths take shape in my mind and masquerade as truths. I imagine my breasts stretching too fast, the skin unable to keep up, tearing under pressure. I imagine them becoming distorted, painful, ruined, words that echo my deepest fears about my body. In my mind, pregnancy becomes violent instead of organic, something that happens to me rather than through me. These thoughts don't come from ignorance alone. They come from years of believing my body is fragile, from a lifetime of seeing my smallness as a warning sign. If my breasts couldn't grow the way they were supposed to, how can I believe they will change safely now? How can I believe they won't break under the weight of becoming something new? What terrifies me most is not just pain, it's confirmation. The fear that pregnancy will validate every cruel belief I've ever held about myself. That afterward, standing in the mirror, I will see a body that looks even more like a mistake. That I will mourn not just the changes, but the loss of whatever fragile confidence I managed to build. I listen to other women talk about pregnancy with excitement, even pride. Their voices glow with certainty. I sit quietly, nodding, feeling like I'm watching something from behind glass. I wonder what it feels like to trust your body so completely, to believe it is capable, strong, designed for this. My fear makes me feel like an outsider, not just to pregnancy, but to womanhood itself. And still, the dream refuses to die. Despite the terror, despite the myths my anxiety spins, I still want motherhood. I want to believe my body can be more than a source of shame. I want to believe my breasts could become symbols of nourishment instead of inadequacy. But wanting requires courage, and courage feels risky when your body has always felt like a liability. Pregnancy to me is standing at the edge of transformation, one foot pulled forward by longing, the other anchored by fear. It is a dream wrapped tightly in terror, waiting for me to unlearn the lie that my body is too small, too weak, too fragile to carry life. Somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing my breasts as just a part of my body and started seeing them as a diagnosis. Small became synonymous with weak. Delicate became dangerous. I told myself a story so often that it hardened into belief. My body is fragile, and fragility means failure. I don't remember consciously choosing this narrative. It formed quietly, built from years of comparison and doubt. Every time I looked at my chest, I didn't just see size, I saw limitation. I convinced myself that if my breasts were small, then my body must be incapable of holding abundance. as if strength were measured in fullness, as if resilience only lived in volume. I confused size with strength because that's what the world taught me to do. Bigger meant better, fuller meant capable, softness meant readiness, and by that logic, I placed myself on the losing side of biology. I looked at my breasts and felt like my body had opted out of something essential, like it had chosen minimalism where survival required excess. This belief seeped into how I understood my own biology. I began to feel inadequate on a level that went beyond appearance. It wasn't just that I felt unattractive, it was that I felt unfit, unprepared, as though my body hadn't been designed for the demands of womanhood. Pregnancy, breastfeeding, nurturing, these felt like things meant for other bodies, better bodies, bodies that didn't look like mine. Softness, in my mind, became a requirement I failed to meet. I told myself that my small breasts meant I lacked the natural resources other women had, that my body wouldn't know what to do when asked to nourish, to grow, to sustain life. I treated my chest like evidence, proof that something about me was biologically incomplete. This belief hurt in ways I rarely admitted. It created a deep emotional trauma that lived quietly beneath everything else. I didn't just fear judgment from others, I feared disappointment from my own body. I distrusted it. I expected it to fail me. I spoke to it with suspicion instead of care, as though it were a weak structure that might collapse under pressure. Feeling biologically inadequate is a particular kind of pain. It doesn't scream, it corrodes. It makes you question your place in the natural order of things. It makes you wonder if you were built incorrectly, if you missed an evolutionary step everyone else completed. It turns womanhood into a test you believe you've already failed. I carried this trauma silently. I smiled through conversations about pregnancy and motherhood while feeling like an imposter. I listened to stories of bodies changing and adapting and thriving, and I felt separate, like my body existed on a different rulebook. I feared that when the time came, my body would expose me, that it would confirm every doubt I had ever held about its strength. The fragile body narrative didn't just hurt my confidence, it shaped my identity. It made me cautious where I wanted to be brave, afraid where I wanted to trust. It taught me to see my body as a liability instead of a resource, a risk instead of a resource. And the most painful part is this: my body never told me it was weak. I decided that for it. I learned it. I repeated it, until the story felt truer than my own lived experience. This chapter of my fear is not really about my breasts. It's about the meaning I attached to them, about how I mistook smallness for incapacity and softness for failure, about how deeply I internalized the idea that my body was not enough to carry the life I long for. And breaking this narrative feels terrifying, because it would mean admitting that maybe, all along, my body was never fragile at all. The story I tell myself about my body is not neutral. It is heavy, inherited, and unforgiving. It follows me quietly, shaping how I move, how I hope, how I fear. I didn't just decide that my body was fragile, I learned it. I absorbed it from glances, from silences, from the way fullness was praised and smallness was pitied. Over time, my breasts stopped being flesh and became symbols, symbols of what I believed I lacked. I learned to read my body like a warning label. Small breasts meant weakness, minimal curves meant inability. I began to believe that my body was built with less margin for error, less tolerance for change, as if there was a limited supply of strength in me and it had already been used up. I told myself that resilience lives in abundance, that bodies like mine are too delicate to endure pressure. This belief is cruel because it feels logical. It disguises itself as realism. I told myself I was just being honest, just being prepared for disappointment. But beneath that so-called honesty was fear, raw and unexamined. I equated size with strength because it gave my insecurity a structure. If I could explain my fear biologically, then it felt justified, scientific. I wasn't insecure, I told myself. I was simply aware. Softness in my mind became a requirement I failed to meet. I convinced myself that my body lacked the necessary substance to nurture, to sustain, to expand. And I imagined pregnancy and motherhood as forces that demand excess. More tissue, more capacity, more room. And I looked at my chest and saw scarcity. I saw limitation. I saw a body that would struggle to rise to the occasion. This is where the trauma deepened, from appearance into identity. Feeling biologically inadequate is not just about how you look, it's about how you belong. It makes you feel misplaced in your own womanhood, like you were given a body that didn't come with the full set of instructions. I felt as though nature had overlooked me, or worse, misjudged me, as though my body had opted out of a role I desperately wanted to play. I stopped trusting my body's intelligence. I doubted its ability to adapt, to respond, and to know what to do when the moment arrived. I imagined my breasts as passive, unprepared, almost fragile to the point of danger. I treated them like porcelain, something that might crack under pressure, instead of transform through it. This belief didn't just stay in my head, it settled into my emotions. It made me anxious in moments that should have felt hopeful. It made me cautious when I wanted to be excited. It made me feel like motherhood was a test designed for bodies unlike mine. I began to see myself as an exception, not in a special way, but in a failing one. And the pain of that belief is lonely. I listened to conversations about pregnancy and breastfeeding with a quiet ache, feeling like an observer rather than a participant. I smiled while feeling separate, as though my body had already been disqualified. I feared that if I dared to trust it, it would humiliate me by proving me wrong, so I chose mistrust instead. Mistrust felt safer than hope. The fragile body narrative became my armor. If I expected weakness, then failure wouldn't surprise me. If I believed my body was incapable, then fear felt rational. But armor is heavy, and wearing it for too long bruises the skin beneath. What I am only beginning to understand, slowly, reluctantly, is that this narrative was never written by my body. My breasts never told me they were weak. My biology never confessed inadequacy. These were conclusions I reached after years of listening to voices that equated worth with volume and capability with size. The trauma is not in my flesh, it is in the meaning I assigned to it. And unraveling this story feels terrifying, because it would mean letting go of the explanation I've used for my fear. It would mean admitting that maybe, all along, my body was never fragile at all.
There is a kind of fear that doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers, shadows every glance, and settles in your chest like a weight that refuses to lift. For me, it begins with being seen, not in the casual, everyday way that the world sees people, but truly seen, naked, vulnerable, unvarnished. The thought of someone, my partner, a doctor, even my own reflection looking at my body, makes my stomach coil tight with dread. I have always been painfully aware of my breasts, their smallness, the way they curve too little, the way they fail to elicit admiration even in fleeting moments. I have tucked them away under layers of clothing, padded bras, and self-conscious postures, praying that no one would notice, that no one would see what I feared was inadequate. But now, in pregnancy, hiding feels impossible. My breasts swell, sensitive to every touch, a public signal of the life growing within me, yet to me they feel grotesque, alien, impossible to love. I stare at them in the mirror, and the reflection is both mine and not mine. A vessel of creation, yes, but also a canvas of my insecurities. Every interaction becomes a test of courage. A midwife's professional examination is transformed into a stage where I'm unwillingly performing, stripped of control. My partner's touch, once comforting, now carries a weight I cannot measure. Will he see me with tenderness, or will he see only flaws? Even my own eyes betray me, scanning, measuring, criticizing, dissecting, cataloging every curve and stretch I never wanted to be noticed. It is a constant exposure, and exposure is terrifying. Intimacy, once simple and reassuring, now feels like an impossible gamble. To let someone see me fully is to invite judgment. To surrender to touch is to reveal vulnerabilities I have worked a lifetime to conceal. And yet, the child growing inside me depends on me embracing this exposure. I cannot hide from pregnancy. It is an unavoidable unveiling. My breasts, once a private concern, are now instruments of both nourishment and fear. I imagine them sagging, uneven, inadequate in the eyes of others, and worst of all, in my own eyes. Will they be adored or merely tolerated? Will intimacy bring closeness or a cruel reminder of my imperfection? The shame and the fear are deeply intertwined. I feel exposed not just physically, but emotionally. Every bodily change becomes a mirror reflecting my anxieties. Every stretch mark a loud reminder that I may never reclaim the body I once wished I had. My self-consciousness is constant, whispering that my worth is measured in curves and softness, in the way my breasts are bared in light or shadow. Pregnancy makes those whispers roar. And yet, there are fleeting moments of fragile wonder. In the quiet, when the baby stirs and the room is still, I feel a subtle awe at what my body is accomplishing. I see potential in the breasts I once despised. They are no longer just objects of shame, but tools of life, of nourishment, of creation. But the fear persists, gnawing, intimate, shattering even these moments of awe. Exposure remains unavoidable, vulnerability inescapable. Pregnancy strips me bare in ways I could never have imagined. It demands surrender to intimacy, exposure, and deep vulnerability, challenging every layer of insecurity I have built over decades. I am seen, constantly, by the world and by myself, and the reflection I confront is both terrifying and humbling. To survive this, I must learn a fragile courage, the courage to allow myself to be seen, the courage to confront my shame, and perhaps, slowly, the courage to begin seeing my own body not as an object of ridicule, but as a vessel of something miraculous.
Fear has a way of speaking louder than reality. It whispers lies in the quiet hours, casting shadows over every thought, every glance, every heartbeat. For me, it centers on my breasts, the small, imperfect, shameful things I have spent years hiding, criticizing, wishing away. Pregnancy made me confront them in ways I never wanted. Every swell, every ache, every stretch became a drumbeat of anxiety. My imagination, cruel and relentless, insisted that they would betray me, that they would sag, burst, fail, or embarrass me in ways that would leave me unlovable. But there is a truth my fear refuses to speak,
a truth quiet and unassuming, yet profound. My body is not fragile in the way my mind insists. It is intelligent, resilient, capable of adapting in ways I cannot always see or understand. My breasts, small and uneven though they may be, are not balloons on the verge of explosion. They are living tissue, evolving constantly, responding to hormones, to growth, to the needs of the life I carry. They have an innate knowledge my fear cannot comprehend, a rhythm and wisdom built over millennia of human life. I remember lying in bed one night, hands pressed to my chest, mind spiraling, as it often does, imagining the worst. I felt the soft rise and fall of my small breasts, sensitive and swollen, and I realized they were still intact. They had not betrayed me. They were accommodating this new life with quiet efficiency, learning, stretching, adapting without complaint, without malice, without shame. Yet my fear had painted them as treacherous, fragile, and monstrous, a canvas for my insecurities to run wild. Pregnancy magnifies every worry. It twists reality until it seems almost impossible to believe the truth. I felt as if my breasts might fail me, that every gentle tug, every moment of growth might cause irreparable damage. But the body does not work that way. It is generous and precise, even when our minds are cruel and unkind. Breasts, like other organs, adapt. They expand to nourish, they contract when needed, and they heal. They are resilient. They are alive. And yet, fear silences these facts. It exaggerates pain, distorts perception, and convinces me that what is natural is catastrophic. The quietest victories often go unnoticed. A new sensation of fullness, a subtle shift in weight, a small stretch mark appearing and fading, it all speaks to a body that is doing exactly what it was made to do. I may be insecure, I may be self-conscious, I may never see my breasts with the ease or admiration I wish I could, but the truth remains, they are functional, adaptable, miraculous. My fear has no power over their innate intelligence. Learning to witness this truth without judgment is perhaps the most radical act of courage I can summon. It does not erase insecurity, but it offers perspective that my body, small breasts and all, is not an enemy. It is a vessel, a resilient companion, a living testament to life's quiet brilliance. My fear may still whisper, but slowly, in glimpses and moments, I can start to hear the truth it has refused to tell me, that I am stronger than my anxieties, and my body is wiser than my doubts. Fear is loud. It shouts in the stillness of night, fills empty rooms, and presses against the chest with the weight of 1,000 unspoken judgments. For me, it speaks most cruelly about my body, my breasts, the very parts of me I have always kept hidden, criticized, and wished away. Pregnancy made me confront them in ways I never wanted. Every swell, every ache, every stretch became a drumbeat of anxiety. My imagination, cruel and relentless, insisted that they would betray me, that they would sag, burst, fail, or embarrass me in ways that would leave me unlovable. But there is a truth my fear refuses to speak, a truth quiet and unassuming, yet profound. My body is not fragile in the way my mind insists. It is intelligent, resilient, capable of adapting in ways I cannot always see or understand. My breasts, small and uneven though they may be, are not balloons on the verge of explosion. They are living tissue, evolving constantly, responding to hormones, to growth, to the needs of the life I carry. They have an innate knowledge my fear cannot comprehend, a rhythm and wisdom built over millennia of human life. I remember lying in bed one night, hands pressed to my chest, mind spiraling, as it often does, imagining the worst. I felt the soft rise and fall of my small breasts, sensitive and swollen, and I realized they were still intact. They had not betrayed me. They were accommodating this new life with quiet efficiency, learning, stretching, adapting without complaint, without malice, without shame. Yet my fear had painted them as treacherous, fragile, and monstrous, a canvas for my insecurities to run wild. Pregnancy magnifies every worry. It twists reality until it seems almost impossible to believe the truth. I felt as if my breasts might fail me, that every gentle tug, every moment of growth might cause irreparable damage. But the body does not work that way. It is generous and precise, even when our minds are cruel and unkind. Breasts, like other organs, adapt. They expand to nourish, they contract when needed, and they heal. They are resilient. They are alive. And yet, fear silences these facts. It exaggerates pain, distorts perception, and convinces me that what is natural is catastrophic. The quietest victories often go unnoticed. A new sensation of fullness, a subtle shift in weight, a small stretch mark appearing and fading, it all speaks to a body that is doing exactly what it was made to do. I may be insecure, I may be self-conscious, I may never see my breasts with the ease or admiration I wish I could, but the truth remains, they are functional, adaptable, miraculous. My fear has no power over their innate intelligence. Learning to witness this truth without judgment is perhaps the most radical act of courage I can summon. It does not erase insecurity, but it offers perspective that my body, small breasts and all, is not an enemy. It is a vessel, a resilient companion, a living testament to life's quiet brilliance. My fear may still whisper, but slowly, in glimpses and moments, I can start to hear the truth it has refused to tell me, that I am stronger than my anxieties, and my body is wiser than my doubts. Fear is loud. It shouts in the stillness of night, fills empty rooms, and presses against the chest with the weight of 1,000 unspoken judgments. For me, it speaks most cruelly about my body, my breasts, the very parts of me I have always kept hidden, criticized, and wished away. Pregnancy made me confront them in ways I never wanted. Every swell, every ache, every stretch became a drumbeat of anxiety. My imagination, cruel and relentless, insisted that they would betray me, that they would sag, burst, fail, or embarrass me in ways that would leave me unlovable. But there is a truth my fear refuses to speak, a truth quiet and unassuming, yet profound. My body is not fragile in the way my mind insists. It is intelligent, resilient, capable of adapting in ways I cannot always see or understand. My breasts, small and uneven though they may be, are not balloons on the verge of explosion. They are living tissue, evolving constantly, responding to hormones, to growth, to the needs of the life I carry. They have an innate knowledge my fear cannot comprehend, a rhythm and wisdom built over millennia of human life. I remember lying in bed one night, hands pressed to my chest, mind spiraling, as it often does, imagining the worst. I felt the soft rise and fall of my small breasts, sensitive and swollen, and I realized they were still intact. They had not betrayed me. They were accommodating this new life with quiet efficiency, learning, stretching, adapting without complaint, without malice, without shame. Yet my fear had painted them as treacherous, fragile, and monstrous, a canvas for my insecurities to run wild. Pregnancy magnifies every worry. It twists reality until it seems almost impossible to believe the truth. I felt as if my breasts might fail me, that every gentle tug, every moment of growth might cause irreparable damage. But the body does not work that way. It is generous and precise, even when our minds are cruel and unkind. Breasts, like other.
There is a quiet mourning in the life of a woman who has spent decades wishing her body were different. For me, it has always centered on my breasts, the small, uneven, understated parts of me that never seemed to fit the image I imagined for myself. I carried them like a secret, a flaw that marked me as somehow incomplete. And now, with pregnancy, every ache, every stretch, every subtle change is a reminder of what I have always envied and what I feel I have never possessed: a body that feels admired, loved, whole. Grieving the body I think I should have had is like staring at a reflection that refuses to lie. I see a chest that is soft where I wanted firm, small where I imagined full, uneven where symmetry should reign. I see curves that exist, but not in the ways I fantasized, a shape that grows and shifts in ways my mind cannot embrace. And I mourn, not just the body itself, but the attention, desire, and confidence I feel it would have brought me, the ease I imagine others must feel in their own skin. Self-blame is a constant companion. I catch myself thinking, why did I not eat differently, exercise more, work harder? The shame is relentless, whispering that if only I had done something, my breasts might have been fuller, my skin tighter, my body more worthy. Resentment bubbles up too, not just at myself, but at the world that seems to reward a different kind of body, a body that aligns with ideals I have always struggled to reach. Pregnancy intensifies these emotions, transforming them into a complex cocktail of nostalgia, sorrow, and quiet rage at the unfairness of expectations. Yet, grief, I am learning, is not weakness. It is a testament to the depth of longing, the honesty of self-reflection, the courage to confront disappointment instead of burying it. Mourning the ideal body I never had does not make me smaller, less capable, or undeserving. It simply means I am human. It means I feel, and I notice, and I care deeply about how I inhabit the skin I was given. Grief is a mirror. It reflects what we value, what we desire, and what we have longed for, but it also illuminates the resilience we often forget we possess. I imagine my breasts, once a source of shame, and I let myself whisper, I mourn you not because you are weak, but because I have wanted more, and I grieve that longing. In this quiet acknowledgement, a shift begins. Letting go of self-blame is not instantaneous. It is jagged, uneven, like my body itself. But each breath, each pause, each reluctant acceptance of imperfection loosens the grip of resentment. I do not have to become someone else to find peace. I only need to see my body honestly, mourn what was never mine, and slowly extend tenderness toward the form that carries life within it. There is a subtle liberation in this grief. It is a grief that allows tears without judgment, anger without shame, longing without guilt. It is a grief that teaches me to differentiate between desire and self-condemnation, between mourning and defeat. I grieve my body not because it has failed me, but because I have held expectations that were never fair. In this act, there is power. In this act, there is quiet reclamation of my life, my self-worth, and my capacity to care for the body I inhabit today. Pregnancy has taught me that my body is not a vessel for perfection, but a vessel for life, for experience, for transformation. My breasts, my curves, my softness, they are not betrayals of the ideal I imagined, but living proofs of resilience, of adaptability, of beauty defined not by symmetry or size, but by function, strength, and endurance. Grief acknowledges loss, yes, but it also clears the path to acceptance, to awe, and finally to a fragile, hard-won tenderness toward myself. In mourning the body I thought I should have had, I begin to glimpse something greater,
the possibility that my worth is not tethered to size, shape, or appearance, that my breasts, small or imperfect, are enough, and that the body I carry, though flawed in my eyes, is extraordinary in ways fear and self-doubt have long refused to tell me.
Reclaiming my body has not been a sudden revelation. It has been a slow, trembling process, like learning to walk across a bridge suspended over a deep, invisible chasm. For years, I spoke to my body with harshness, criticizing every curve, judging every imperfection, resenting the smallness of my breasts and the softness I tried to hide. Pregnancy forced me into a confrontation I could no longer avoid. My body was changing, evolving, growing life inside me, and I could either resist it with shame or begin to speak to it with gentleness. Gentleness did not come easily. At first, I recoiled from my reflection in the mirror, avoiding the swell of my belly, the fullness of my breasts, the stretch of skin that felt alien. I flinched at the touch of my own hands, half expecting my body to fail me, half expecting it to betray me. But slowly I began to try. Small moments of acknowledgement without criticism, soft whispers of gratitude for the way my body carries life, for the way it endures, adapts, and surprises me. I began to frame pregnancy not as destruction, but as transformation. Every ache, every stretch, every change became a reminder of resilience rather than a signal of imperfection. My breasts, once a source of shame and self-consciousness, were no longer just small or uneven, they were alive, learning, growing in preparation for nurturing. I began to see softness not as weakness, but as power. The curves and folds that I had tried to hide became symbols of survival, of endurance, of life unfolding within me. Reclaiming my body also meant reclaiming my perspective. I began to notice moments of awe where I once only saw flaws. I felt the flutter of life inside my womb and marveled at how my body could harbor and sustain another being. I touched my breasts and noticed their responsiveness, their vitality, the gentle strength beneath the skin. I dressed myself with care, choosing garments that honored the shape I had rather than hiding it. And in those choices, I felt a quiet assertion of ownership. This reclamation is neither perfect nor instantaneous. Some days, shame creeps in again, and old insecurities demand attention. My reflection still sometimes feels foreign, my breasts still sometimes seem inadequate, my body still occasionally whispers that I am unworthy. But even in these moments, there is progress. I have learned to acknowledge these thoughts without surrendering to them. I have learned that softness can coexist with strength, that vulnerability can coexist with courage, and that beauty is not only in perfection, but in survival, endurance, and adaptation. I am slowly learning to speak to my body as a companion rather than an adversary. I whisper thanks instead of criticism. I marvel at its capacity to transform and adapt instead of cataloging every perceived flaw. I am discovering power in softness, tenderness in curves, and beauty in survival. Pregnancy has demanded that I confront my insecurities, but it has also gifted me the chance to reclaim my body with intention, compassion, and awe. And perhaps most importantly, I am beginning to see my breasts differently, not as small, inadequate objects of shame, but as vital, responsive, resilient parts of me. They are not failures to be hidden, but living tissue that carries life and adapts with wisdom my mind cannot fully comprehend. Through this slow reclamation, I begin to experience a new intimacy with myself,
a fragile, tender, but real acceptance that my body, in all its imperfection, is worthy of attention, care, and even admiration. Reclaiming my body is not an end, but a journey that moves through fear, grief, self-consciousness, and uncertainty, and arrives, sometimes fleetingly, at awe, tenderness, and quiet empowerment. Pregnancy has demanded that I surrender to change, but in that surrender, I am learning that I can also reclaim myself slowly, gently, and fully. Reclaiming my body has been a delicate, painstaking process, far from linear, filled with hesitation, setbacks, and small, almost imperceptible victories. For so long, I had spoken to my body with criticism, a litany of harsh judgments that focused on what I lacked, on the perceived failures of my breasts, my curves, my softness. Pregnancy demanded a confrontation I could no longer avoid. My body was changing in undeniable ways, becoming larger, more sensitive, more alive. And yet, I had to learn to stop seeing these changes as betrayals and begin learning to see them as transformations. Gentleness with myself was not immediate. The mirror remained my enemy at first, reflecting a chest I had always scorned, small, uneven, sensitive, and a belly that grew in ways both foreign and frightening. I would flinch at the sight of it, avert my gaze, and whisper complaints under my breath. But slowly, day by day, I tried a different approach. I started noticing the softness of my skin without judgment, feeling the swell of my breasts and the gentle pulse of life within me, and allowing a quiet acknowledgement, you are doing your job, you are not failing. The transformation of my body demanded a reframing of my own perspective. Pregnancy was not destruction, as my fear had long insisted. It was creation, adaptation, evolution. My breasts, once a source of relentless insecurity, were teaching me a new language, a language of responsiveness, nourishment, and resilience. Their smallness was no longer evidence of inadequacy, it was evidence of adaptability, of a body learning to carry, to sustain, to provide. Softness was no longer weakness. Curves and folds were not failures, they were proof of survival, of endurance, and the miraculous complexity of life itself. I began to reclaim control not by forcing perfection, but by choosing intentional care. I dressed myself differently, selecting clothes that honored my shape rather than hiding it. I lingered in mirrors, studying the subtleties of my body rather than cataloging flaws. I touched my breasts with awe rather than criticism, feeling their responsiveness, their warmth, their capacity to create and nurture. Each small act became a quiet declaration, I belong in this body. I am allowed to inhabit it fully. Reclaiming my body has been slow because old insecurities remain. I still flinch at reflections, I still feel pangs of shame when my breasts swell or ache, when my belly stretches and moves in ways I cannot control. But even these moments are part of the reclamation. By noticing shame without surrendering to it, I am teaching myself resilience. I am learning that softness can coexist with strength, that vulnerability can coexist with courage, and that beauty is not only in perfection, but in survival, endurance, and adaptation. I am slowly learning to speak to my body as a companion rather than an adversary. I whisper thanks instead of criticism. I marvel at its capacity to transform and adapt instead of cataloging every perceived flaw. I am discovering power in softness, tenderness in curves, and beauty in survival. Pregnancy has demanded that I confront my insecurities, but it has also gifted me the chance to reclaim my body with intention, compassion, and awe. And perhaps most importantly, I am beginning to see my breasts differently, not as small, inadequate objects of shame, but as vital, responsive, resilient parts of me. They are not failures to be hidden, but living tissue that carries life and adapts with wisdom my mind cannot fully comprehend. Through this slow reclamation, I begin to experience a new intimacy with myself, a fragile, tender, but real acceptance that my body, in all its imperfection, is worthy of attention, care, and even admiration. Reclaiming my body is not an end, but a journey that moves through fear, grief, self-consciousness, and uncertainty, and arrives, sometimes fleetingly, at awe, tenderness, and quiet empowerment. Pregnancy has demanded that I surrender to change, but in that surrender, I am learning that I can also reclaim myself slowly, gently, and fully. Reclaiming my body has been a delicate, painstaking process, far from linear, filled with hesitation, setbacks, and small, almost imperceptible victories. For so long, I had spoken to my body with criticism, a litany of harsh judgments that focused on what I lacked, on the perceived failures of my breasts.
For years, I believed that womanhood demanded perfection. I believed that my body, my breasts, my curves, my softness, all of it, had to align with some invisible standard in order to be worthy, desirable, loved. I watched other women, envied them quietly, compared myself endlessly, and felt the sting of inadequacy prick my heart daily. Pregnancy forced me to confront a truth I had long avoided, that my body, fragile and imperfect as I perceived it, was not failing me. It was transforming me. Transformation, however, is never gentle. It begins with vulnerability. For me, that meant confronting my breasts, small, uneven, sensitive, the parts of me I had scrutinized, hidden, and scorned. It meant standing in the mirror, touching my body, feeling the swell of life within me and daring to say, "You are enough. You are doing something extraordinary." This act of acknowledgement, small though it was, marked the first step in rewriting my story. I began to realize that womanhood is not about meeting impossible ideals. It is about presence, being present in your body, in your life, in the moment. Motherhood does not demand perfection. It demands vulnerability, courage, and attentiveness. The stretch of my skin, the changes in my breasts, the heaviness in my belly, they are not failures. They are evidence that my body can carry life, sustain life, and transform in ways that are nothing short of miraculous. I am witnessing power in softness, strength in curves, and beauty in imperfection. With each passing day, I noticed subtle shifts. I no longer flinch at my reflection, though shame still visits occasionally. I speak to my body with gentleness rather than judgment, offering gratitude where there once was criticism. I marvel at the intelligence in my breasts, the way they adapt and respond, the way they will nurture the life I carry. I feel a tentative pride in my softness, my capacity to endure, and my ability to give life even when my mind has long doubted it. Becoming a mother is, in a way, the ultimate reclamation of self. It teaches that fragility does not equate to weakness, that vulnerability can be a source of strength, and that presence, truly being present in your body and your life, is more valuable than any idealized standard of perfection. I see now that I do not need flawless curves, perfectly symmetrical breasts, or a body sculpted to the gaze of the world. I need only to inhabit this body fully, tenderly, attentively, and with courage. In this new story of womanhood, fear no longer dictates my identity.
Insecurity no longer defines my worth. I am learning to become someone who is tender yet resilient, aware of flaws yet attentive to strengths, present in my body yet unafraid of its changes. My breasts, once a source of shame, now symbolize adaptability, resilience, and life-giving power. My softness is strength, my vulnerability is courage, and my imperfect body is a vessel of awe. This journey from fragile to fierce, from insecure to becoming, is ongoing. There are moments when self-doubt returns, when old comparisons creep back into my thoughts, when I question whether I am enough. But these moments are now met with awareness and compassion rather than despair. I am learning to stand in my body, to honor it, and to witness its brilliance without demanding perfection. I am learning that motherhood, like womanhood, is not about meeting ideals, but about presence, being fully here, fully alive, and fully engaged with the miraculous life my body can create and sustain. In embracing this truth, I write a new story of myself, one where fear and shame are chapters of the past, where resilience and tenderness coexist, and where my body, small breasts, soft curves, and all, is recognized not for its imperfections, but for its power, its intelligence, and its ability to carry me forward into a life that is wholly my own. For as long as I can remember, I defined myself by what I lacked. I measured my worth in the size and shape of my breasts, in the firmness of my curves, in the softness of my skin, and in the imagined ideal body that I had never owned. I compared myself endlessly, envied effortlessly, and punished my body with my thoughts. Pregnancy shattered some of these illusions in the harshest and most intimate way. It forced me to confront my body, not as a canvas for perfection, but as a vessel for creation. At first, this confrontation felt unbearable. Every change felt like a betrayal. My breasts, small and uneven, swelled and ached, and I imagined them as proof of failure rather than proof of life. My belly grew, my skin stretched, and I felt as though I were wearing a body that belonged to someone else. Self-consciousness became a constant companion, whispering that I was unworthy, flawed, inadequate. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the shame, a quiet truth began to stir. My body was performing something extraordinary, something I had long taken for granted. Reclaiming myself in this moment required gentleness, patience, and a willingness to listen. I began to speak to my body differently, softly, tentatively, offering words of gratitude where before there had been only criticism. I touched my breasts with reverence instead of judgment, feeling their responsiveness, their adaptability, their intelligence. I traced the curve of my belly with wonder, acknowledging the life within me and the strength my body carried. In these small acts, I began to rewrite the story I had long told myself, that my worth depended on perfection, into a story of presence, resilience, and awe. I began to see that motherhood does not demand perfection, it demands presence. To carry life, to nurture, to be attentive to the tiny, unfolding existence within me required nothing more than my willingness to inhabit my body fully, tenderly, courageously. Every stretch mark, every swell, every curve became a symbol not of failure, but of survival and creation. My softness became a testament to adaptability, my vulnerability a source of courage, and my breasts, once objects of shame, proof of life's quiet intelligence. Womanhood, I realized, is not about the absence of fear or insecurity. It is about how we navigate them. It is about finding strength in fragility, confidence in vulnerability, and pride in imperfection. My breasts, my soft curves, my tender belly, these are not limitations. They are evidence of resilience, of adaptability, of power. And in embracing them, I am beginning to inhabit a body that is wholly my own, free from the relentless standards of others or the cruel expectations I once placed upon myself. This journey from fragile to fierce is neither clean nor linear. I still catch glimpses of insecurity in the mirror. I still worry about my breasts, my curves, my softness. But these moments are now tempered with awareness and compassion. I have learned to hold them gently, to acknowledge them without surrendering to fear. Each day, I claim more of myself, speak more kindly to my body, and recognize the beauty inherent in survival, growth, and creation. In this new story of womanhood, I am becoming present in my body, present in my life, present in the life I carry within me. I am learning to see motherhood not as a test of perfection, but as a testament to resilience. I am learning to see my body not as a battlefield of flaws and shame, but as a vessel of power, intelligence, and transformation. I am learning, finally, that my worth does not depend on what I look like. It depends on my capacity to inhabit myself fully, tenderly, and with courage. And so, the fragile girl who once flinched at her own reflection is slowly stepping into something new. She is learning to meet her gaze with curiosity, tenderness, and awe. She is discovering that softness can coexist with strength, that vulnerability can coexist with courage, and that life can be carried with dignity, even in a body she once scorned. Her breasts, her curves, her imperfections, they are no.
There is a silence that comes at the end of a long day, the quiet that follows fear, the stillness after tears. It is in this space that I finally allow myself to speak, to whisper truths I have hidden even from myself for years. My body, once a source of relentless judgment and private shame, is learning to hear my voice not as critique, but as comfort. My body is not too small for love, I whisper, softly at first, almost afraid to speak it aloud. My breasts, the ones I have long believed too small, too uneven, too unworthy, seem to shift beneath my fingers, as though listening, as though understanding. For so long, I have equated size with desirability, curves with worth, perfection with love. But I am beginning to learn that love does not measure, does not weigh, does not judge. My body, with all its soft folds and tender swellings, is entirely capable of being loved. By others, yes, but most importantly, by me. My body is not too weak for life, I murmur next, feeling the pulse of life beneath my skin, the subtle movements of growth and adaptation that I could once only fear. My chest aches, my belly stretches, my breasts swell and shift, and I remember the countless hours I spent fearing fragility, imagining collapse, imagining failure. But my body endures, it adapts, it nurtures, it carries more than I ever believed it could. The small, sensitive breasts I once despised are not betrayals. They are vessels of resilience, responding to the demands of life with quiet, persistent intelligence. And finally, I whisper the words that feel almost impossible, yet necessary. My body knows how to hold more than fear. I think of the nights I spent awake, staring at the curve of my chest, imagining inadequacy, imagining ridicule. I think of every touch I flinched from, every glance I avoided, every reflection that felt like a verdict.
And I realize my body has carried all of this, my fear, my grief, my longing, and it still stands. It still adapts. It still gives. It still nurtures. My body is not fragile. It is not a failure. It is capable of tenderness, courage, resilience, and love, far more than fear could ever claim.
These whispers are not declarations of triumph. They are fragile, trembling, intimate acknowledgments, spoken in the quiet when no one else is listening. They are truths that my insecurity once silenced, truths that my shame once dismissed, truths that my fear once mocked. And yet, here they are, alive, persistent, real. My body, small breasts, soft curves, tender, imperfect, is enough. It is capable. It is alive. It is deserving. In this closing whisper, I give myself permission to stay in my body fully, without judgment, without comparison, without the need for perfection. I allow my hands to rest gently on my chest, to feel the rhythm of life and adaptation. I allow my eyes to trace the curves I once avoided, to see resilience instead of flaw, to see the capacity for nurturing, for love, for endurance. And as I exhale, I feel the fear loosen its grip, just a little. My body, once a battlefield of doubt, becomes a sanctuary of possibility. My breasts, my belly, my softness, they are not failures. They are instruments of life, proof of resilience, and companions in the journey of becoming. I whisper again, this time with a little more certainty. My body is not too small for love. My body is not too weak for life. My body knows how to hold more than fear. And in this whisper, fragile yet unwavering, I find a quiet revolution, the beginning of acceptance, the first spark of courage, the tender acknowledgement that my body, every curve, every swell, every imperfection is enough, more than enough. The room is quiet. The world outside has faded into muted shadows, leaving only the soft rhythm of my breath and the subtle pulse of life within me. It is here, in this sacred stillness, that I allow myself to speak truths I have kept buried for decades, truths that insecurity, fear, and shame have tried to silence. My body, once a relentless judgment, is finally listening, not as an adversary, but as a companion, as a vessel that has carried me through grief, fear, and transformation. I press my hands to my chest and whisper, softly, almost shyly, my body is not too small for love. For so long, I measured my worth by my breasts, their size, their symmetry, their perceived appeal, and found myself wanting. I believed that love was conditional, that desire hinged on perfection, that smallness was synonymous with inadequacy. But now I feel the truth beneath my fingertips. Love is not measured by size, nor dictated by shape. My body, small breasts, soft curves, tender imperfections, is fully capable of being loved. It has always been capable, even when my mind refused to see it. I let the whisper linger, feeling it sink into my chest, into the spaces of self-doubt I have long inhabited. Then I continue, softer, more deliberate. My body is not too weak for life. I think of the nights I feared fragility, imagined collapse, imagined betrayal by the very vessel that now nurtures life within me. I feel the stretch of skin, the pulse of growth, the warmth of my swelling breasts, and I realize my body endures, it adapts, it carries life and possibility, resilience and love. The smallness I once scorned is not failure, it is strength in quiet, living form. My body is not weak, it has never been weak. And finally, I whisper the words that feel revolutionary, almost dangerous in their intimacy. My body knows how to hold more than fear. I remember the years I spent flinching from my reflection, avoiding intimacy, hiding in shame. I remember the quiet grief over the body I thought I should have had, the relentless self-blame, the moments of comparing myself to imagined ideals. And yet, here I am. My body has carried all of it, my doubt, my sorrow, my longing, and it continues to thrive, to adapt, to nurture, to endure. My body holds life, possibility, and strength, more than fear, always more than fear. I trace the curve of my breasts, tender and alive beneath night touch, and I feel gratitude mixed with awe. These small, uneven, sensitive parts of me, once my greatest source of shame, are capable of sustaining life, of responding with intelligence and purpose. My belly, swelling and stretching, is a living testament to endurance. My softness is not weakness. My vulnerability is not failure. My body is a miracle disguised in the ordinary, and for the first time I am willing to see it. The whispers grow steadier, more confident. I speak to myself as I would to a child, or a friend, or the life growing inside me. You are enough. You are alive. You are capable. You are deserving of love and tenderness from others and from yourself. You are stronger than you know, braver than you imagine, and more resilient than you have ever allowed yourself to believe. I close my eyes and let the words wash over me. Let them settle into the corners of my mind that have long believed only criticism and fear. I breathe in the quiet, breathe out the self-doubt. I allow myself to linger here, in tenderness, in awe, in recognition. My body is not perfect. It is not flawless. It is soft where I once wanted hard, imperfect where I once wanted ideal, and yet in its imperfection I find beauty, courage, and life. And so I whisper again, this time with a steady certainty. My body is not too small for love. My body is not too weak for life. My body knows how to hold more than fear. And in this whisper, fragile yet unwavering, I find a quiet revolution, the beginning of acceptance, the first spark of courage, the tender acknowledgement that my body, every curve, every swell, every imperfection, is enough, more than enough, always enough.
Thank you for sharing such an honest and deeply personal journey with us. What you've reminded us today is that the fears we carry about our bodies, our breasts, our bellies, our very selves, are valid, real, and worthy of attention. Motherhood doesn't erase who we are, nor does it diminish our beauty or worth. It reshapes us, challenges us, and sometimes scares us, but it also opens the door to resilience we never knew we had. To every woman listening, your body has the incredible power to nurture life, yes, but it also has the right to tenderness, care, and respect from yourself and from others. Tiny breasts, big fears, unexpected changes, they are not failures. They are markers of courage, and courage, as we've heard today, is what carries us through. May we leave here not only informed, but inspired, ready to embrace the transformations, the uncertainties, and the miracles of motherhood with grace, love, and unwavering self-compassion. Once again, if you have not subscribed to this channel, please leave whatever you're doing right now and like, share, subscribe, and comment on this channel to enable us get your feedback and improve our communication and interaction with you as we prepare our subsequent episodes. Please press the subscription button now. Keep a date with me in Dr. Charlotte's Corner by subscribing and pressing the notification button to get immediate notification on our next episode, Pregnancy Fears and Trauma. Would my husband still see me as beautiful and sexy when my body begins to change? Keep a date with Dr. Charlotte's on this coming episode. Stay tuned.